What's up, Chaos Shinobi here. This is what if Naruto has evolved Mangekyou. Summary: Naruto unlocks an evolved Mangekyou when he is experimented on with cells from Uchiha Madara Watch as Naruto learns to harness this incredible power and control the blackest twins with his new eyes. Chapter 9. Let the tournament begin. 500 years ago, 3 miles from present-day Konoha. Death was interesting thing. Words were wasted on it, its laconic nature made it a quiet companion. Indeed, that Kandine and held so much power over even the strongest of mortals with the collar of the fiercest criminal unable to overcome that nebulous force. Yet to her, death was a friend and ally of sorts even. To escape the palaver of her supposed life and instead make anew in silence. That sordid life she led made her believe that all mortals, herself included, were condemned to that inexorable fate called life. She despised living, yet found that she could not escape it. Such a paradox would seem inviting to many, but to her, it was an abject hell that held no escape. And so, it was during her final moments of breathing that she looked up at the moon and took it into her in all its entirety. Eyes resting, her white katana rested on her chest as her sable armor complemented the porcelain sheath. Sighing, she closed her eyes as she embraced her forlorn death. She had been alone her entire life and had never explored the realms of friendship. Due to her worry of having her gender uncovered, she had never associated with anyone. Indeed, in this era of war and death, a woman on the battlefield was out of the question. Yet fighting had been her only answer. To fight, and thus, to ultimately die. And now she had accomplished her goal. Images of her indignant childhood threatened to interpolate her thoughts, but her severe training kept her steady. Here, surrounded by the 10,000 men she had slain, would she breathe her last. Yet fate would not let her be so simply. Smiling for the first time in her life, she felt her heart beat for what she thought would be the last time before a sudden hole ripped through the space above her. Startled greatly by the alien presence, she had never seen such a technique before in her life. In renascent energy as if the phenomenon had brought her back to life, she stared with wide and curious crimson eyes as a giant arm of white suddenly flew at her and grasped her nimble waist hole. Lifting her up, her trusty katana dropped from her chest as she let herself be taken into the enigmatic rift with her arms hanging limply at her side. The arm had drained her of all her energy and had left her motionless. Led inside the hole, she felt it close behind her as the arm dropped her into what seemed to be a black room. There was no light, and thus, no shapes or colors that she could discern. Her wounds had already begun to heal as she slumped to the ground. The harsh drop was enough to break the band that held her hair together, causing long silver hair to drape over her shoulders. How long had it been since her hair was left in its natural state? Without the threat of any man to see her, she ignored the foreign feeling of not having her hair tied up as she looked around the desolate campus. Was this hell? No. You are not dead. Snapping her eyes open, she shot up with a warrior's instinct as she felt for her katana. Realizing that she had left it on the battlefield, she simply opted for a hand-to-hand combat stance. Rest, child. You have plenty of time to prove your worth later. The room was still completely black, and the voice seemed to come from all around her. Confused, are you? Your punishment and gift for having slain so many men has finally come to you. I know you are one who desires death. However, you still have a duty to fulfill. Angry, she calmly spoke as her insides boiled with a raging vengeance. And who are you, to deny a warrior her death? A man shrouded in pure white suddenly appeared in front of her as light radiated off of him in waves. Being more divine than anything else, she felt her body become weak as she tried to slump against an invisible wall. Eyes downcast by the authority of that light, she bowed her head as the figure placed his hand upon her head. My name is Izanami. You will reside in this chamber outside of time until the time is right. I am sorry, but you will have one final mission before you are allowed to rest. Leaving his words to echo in his place, the man faded from view as she felt her eyes close with drowsiness. As she fell into an unperturbed sleep, she began to see images. Images of a blonde-haired baby with crimson eyes in midnight background. Uzumaki Naruto had always been a boy of patience. Staying with Gensan had helped him refine that patience by teaching him how to sculpt things, thereby effectively using his energy on more fruitful tasks. Yet his so-called master bosses was testing his endurance severely. It had been 3 weeks since he had defeated the 6th animal boss, and even one of the masters had yet to show. Eye twitching, Naruto broke off a branch on a nearby tree and charged some chakra into his fingers. He had long since discovered that his real elemental affinity had been wind. However, since the Uchiha blood almost always demonstrated a fire affinity, his Sharingan had led him to believe that he had been of a fire affinity. In this way, he discovered that when he activated the Sharingan, fire techniques came easier. But when he was in his normal state, wind techniques were almost second nature to him. Refining the chakra he had gathered on his fingers, an invisible blade of wind manifested as he sculpted the raw tree branch. Making little figurines and trinkets had always been a favorite pastime, and during the past 2 weeks, he had refined that activity into a masterful art. Chipping away at the branch with one hand, Naruto used some wind to push back his hair as he twisted it together on the back with a nearby stick. The tiger had said that one of the bosses would come in a week. Supposedly, that week was spent doing an intricate ritual that the three masters partook in to decide who would train the student. Late by 2 weeks, Naruto couldn't help but let his frustration flow as he sculpted images of dying birds, oni, and sea creatures with missing heads and limbs. Meanwhile, in another part of Summon World, Jankenpon. Jankenpon! A bird-like man yelled as several nearby trees exploded in tandem. Damn it! Let me train the boy! A strange aqua-like creature snorted as he threw a giant vortex of water at the bird. No! I want to train him, you stupid Tengu! A gigantic demon with several horns jumped over both of them as he threw a rock overshadowing even himself at them. You guys are both idiots. The great master Oni shall train him. And thus began their 5,023rd consecutive game of rock, paper, scissors since Naruto had defeated the 6th boss. Ooh-oh! Masaki looked at the girl in bewilderment as he let the booger he was about to launch drop mid-finger. Rubbing his eyes, he looked at the mangled body that had just dropped from the tree he was about to topple for a few seconds before it finally registered in his mind that the person in front of him might die. Stepping over to her, he poked her head a couple of times as he whispered, "Hey kid, you alright?" An unintelligible moan was his reply as he realized that his fingers usually broke through rocks on contact. Oh. Whoops! Turning her over, he whistled as he noticed the copious wounds that marred her body. Her legs were especially bad as pieces of flesh had actually torn off the bone, leaving the bloody skeleton exposed to the outside world. Her torso featured several punctures, all of which looked like they had come from a poisonous sword, and the bones in her arm were pulverized to the point of not holding a definite form. But what worried him most was the strange small puncture holes on her neck. Lifting her damp and sticky hair, he frowned as he saw a strange tattoo on her neck. Recognizing it as a product of a cursed jutsu, he shook his head as he looked over her again. It would be impossible for her to recover. Whoever had done this clearly had willed a long and painful death to her. Even the cursed jutsu seemed to be done in reckless abandon, as it wasn't even executed properly. It was almost as if it hadn't been intended for her. Lifting her up slowly, Masaki walked over to a more softer clearing as he laid her down carefully on the grass. Despite his harshness with Naruto, he actually had a soft spot for children. Flexing his arms, Masaki channeled chakra through his body as a green glow surrounded his arms. That Hagchio had taught him this jutsu. Normally it required one to sacrifice his or her life for the victim, but a blue bubble of energy surrounded Masaki as Haku's limbs and body began to regenerate. He wasn't one of the strongest people in the world for nothing. Seeing her cells begin to reform and converge, he sighed as he realized that she would make it. Even jutsus had their limits. However, it looked like it had not been this one's time to die yet. But even then, her wounds were incredibly severe. To recover to a point of standing would take another 3 full days of this. Shaking his head with light mirth, Masaki grumbled as he sat cross-legged. "Since when have I become such a babysitter? God damn it again, you rubbed off on me, kid." Ooh-oh. Hyuga Hinata was a genius. No, she was beyond a genius. Thought to be the culmination of the Hyuga bloodline, her Juken was even stronger than many of the adults. But that was just half of it. If she had remained limited to the Hyuga style, she would have simply remained a genius like her cousin Neji. However, ever since that fateful encounter in the forest, she had secretly trained in almost every other art outside of her clan. The Byakugan was helpful since she was able to watch others train. Call it stealing or anything else, but she had decided to do whatever it costed to get stronger than the boy. Stepping into the complex, the young Hyuga heiress coldly walked past her father as she bowed slightly on her way. She did the same with all the other main branch members. Only to the branch members did she ever greet kindly, even though they usually cowered from her due to her rank. Actually, she couldn't recall ever having a real conversation with any of the members of her family save her sister. To everyone, she was the ice princess of the Hyuga family who maintained a dignity that adopted a precocious air. Opening her door, Hinata sighed as she closed it behind her and walked over to her bed. Flopping backwards onto it, she stretched out her arms before she curled up into a little ball. It was only in the solitude of her room that she was able to drop that mask of coldness and not have to worry about appearances. Closing her eyes, she reached for that black jacket that always remained under her pillow. Her eyes suddenly widened as she felt nothing and quickly turned around to check it carefully. Lifting her pillow, she couldn't find the jacket and she panicked like she had never done before. If her father had found it, the chances of retrieving it were almost zero. Swearing very much not like a royal heiress, Hinata quickly put on her slippers as she ran to her door. Before she got there though, The door opened as Hinata immediately adopted a slower walking pace. It was her sister, Hanabi, at the door. Realizing that it was safe to run, she was about to pass her little sister when she saw a black jacket hidden behind her back. "Hanabi, what do you have behind your back?" The little girl, scared by her older sister's harsh command, remained silent as she opened her muted mouth. "Give that to me." Motionless, Hanabi simply stood there as Hinata walked over to her and took it. "Never take this again. You can have anything else in the room, but not this." Hanabi quietly nodded as tears threatened to spill. Being reprimanded by her father was something she was used to. But her kind sister acting like this. Hinata's gaze softened as she noticed her sister's downcast expression and bent down towards her. "Sorry, Hanabi-chan. This thing is very important to me. I didn't want to lose my temper on you." The little Hyuga quickly ran to Hinata as she hugged her sister's waist. Hinata stroked her little sister's hair as she walked over to her bed. Since Hanabi had never known their mother, Hinata had become somewhat of a surrogate mother to her sister. "Why did you take it?" Her voice was soothing as it simply asked the question due to curiosity, not anger. "You weren't in bed and I was scared. You always hug that when you sleep, so I thought that it would help me too." Hinata smiled as she looked at the jacket and shook her head. "I'm sorry. Here, you can sleep with me tonight. I'll put you back into your own bed in the morning so that father doesn't find out." Hinata received silence in reply as she found her sister already sleeping. Going into bed, Hinata turned off the light as she closed her eyes. She was originally going to go out that night and train in secret, but it was good to rest once in a while too. On the other side of Konoha, another person, also hailed as a genius among geniuses, did not sleep that night as he continuously trained under the moonlight. Every technique was thrown at his brother as he fought thousands of Itachis at a time. Tearing through each one, his imaginary foes fell to his ferocious and precise attacks. Visualization training was helpful in getting his body used to fights, and Uchiha Sasuke's favorite target was, of course, his brother. Charging his fourth Reikiri that night, Sasuke felt chakra overflow his body as he crushed several boulders in one blow. If he wanted to find out the truth, he needed to get stronger. Strong enough to take on all four of his senseis. His brother would never have lost to them. Realizing the gap between himself and Itachi, Sasuke's energy seemed to multiply tenfold as he continuously unleashed everything that he had. "Whoa!" Asuma whistled as he watched the boy train. "So you're saying that he does this every night?" Kakashi nodded as he replied. "Well, every night except Ichiraku's dollar ramen sale days." Anko grinned as she watched Sasuke make several clones fight each other. "So why doesn't he ever fight us like this? It would be a lot more fun if he went all out." "It's obvious that he does not want us to know how strong he's getting. This worries me." Kakashi shook his head. "You're wrong, Ebisu. It's not that he doesn't choose to fight us with his full strength. He can't. That boy has a limit placed on him. Unless his brother is his opponent, he'll never show his full power." Ebisu smirked as he adjusted his sunglasses. "I see. But he does this and still goes through morning training?" Asuma laughed as he lit a cigarette and sighed. "Ah. When we were young." The four remained silent as they continued to watch the young Uchiha go at it before Kakashi suddenly turned to Ebisu. "Hey, how come you're wearing sunglasses at night?" "Ooh oh." Masaki sighed as he watched with boredom. 3 weeks had already passed by and the fourth was coming to a close. The grass tournament was in 3 days and Naruto was supposed to come back today. Ever since he had healed the girl, she had undergone non-stop training with those pansy mirrors of hers. "Hey girl. Why don't you take a break and get something to eat for us?" Haku stopped her technique as she let her ice mirrors disintegrate. This man, Masaki, had healed her. For that, she was incredibly thankful. However, she still felt wary over his immense power. She could tell that even the monstrous snake Sannin did not hold a candle to this man. Speaking of which, she had begun to train herself again. The horrors she had felt from the Sannin would never cease to haunt her. To save her master, she needed to become stronger. Feeling her chakra weighing, she took the man's request to heart as she decided to take a small break. "Yes, Kisama-sama. But why is it that you never go into town?" Masaki waved his hand. "Call me Kisama. Kisama-sama sounds ridiculous. And I can't go into town because of a jutsu I'm using." "A jutsu?" Masaki grinned as she showed some curiosity. For the past week, she had said almost nothing to him. The fact that she was opening up to conversation now made the time pass by way faster. "Yeah. My student is training right now and in order for him to stay there, I have to keep this jutsu up in a remote location. He'll be coming back pretty soon actually. It should only be a few hours now." Haku paled as she thought about such a student. This master was unbelievably strong. But from what she had seen of him so far, she noticed some characteristics that weren't the very dignified. A tree was suddenly uprooted as a booger flew through it. Take that for instance. Letting her curiosity get the better of her, Haku decided to ask some more questions regarding the mysterious student. So your pupil. How long has he been under your tutelage? Masaki grinned as he rubbed his beard. Ah. Interested are you? Haku blushed as she looked away. No, not really. Masaki laughed in jubilee as he ignored her last remark. Well, he is a looker. All I can say about him is that he's a brat. Thinks pretty highly of himself and doesn't like to talk to people. Can't take jokes, doesn't do anything but train for fun, and is bent on a single goal. He also doesn't care too much about his own life, a problem I tried to fix, and he almost never smiles. Haku's mind wandered as she thought of her master. This student seemed almost exactly like Zabuza-sama. Well, except for the brat part. Then again, I've only known him for a little more than a day. Haku almost face-faulted as she laughed nervously. He's only been your student for a day? What about now? Yep. Well, I guess he's technically still training under me because of my jutsu. But yeah. A light bulb suddenly flashed on Inkasama's head as he grinned maliciously. Hey girl. I got a good idea. Why don't you team up with my student for the tournament? Haku tilted her head as she repeated. Tournament? Ooh-oh. In a cave near Mangekyou, Itachi trembled as he coughed up blood into his hand. His sickness was taking a toll on him. Yet even now, he had to persevere. Yes. We must get young Sasuke's eyes. Or even better, Uzumaki Naruto's. Itachi had become used to this voice now. It seemed to come with his Mangekyou. He had never asked Madara if he suffered the same problem. Regardless, he was accustomed to that sinister voice in the back of his head. Uzumaki belongs to Madara. And, fool. Our power is everything. You just don't want the guilt of killing the boy on your hands. After all, your best friend's last request. Shut up. The usually apathetic Itachi screamed in his chamber as images of his friend flooded his interior. That was. You killed him. There's no escaping it. And just as you desired power before, you will desire it again. Itachi grabbed his head as he bit his lip until it bled. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the ring Pain had given the Akatsuki members. The new boss, Pain, had come to control Akatsuki. With Madara gone in the shadows, Itachi had become the second leader of the group under that enigmatic Rainin. Getting up from his desk, Itachi calmly put on his robe as he felt for his hat. A walk around Fire Country was needed. Ooh-oh. Haku and Masaki were eating their fish as they sat opposite to each other across a fire. The two ate in standard silence, with the palaver of strangers between them. Haku was worried about her master while Masaki wondered when Naruto would arrive. According to the clock, Naruto was supposed to have come back 2 hours ago. Yet it was almost time for the sun to set and the boy had still not appeared. In the worst-case scenario, Naruto had died during the training. Those who lost their lives in the summon world remained there due to the secrets they learned from the animal summon bosses. But he had faith in his student. The chosen one would return, as he and his other student had. Looking over to the girl across from him, Masaki frowned. As soon as he had mentioned the Kusagakure tournament, the girl had immediately volunteered to sign up for it without even hearing the details. Decisions like that only came from vendettas. Shaking his head, he sighed as he watched her solemn eyes staring at her fish. That was the face of one bent on revenge. So young, yet so ignorant of the effects. Kisama-sama. Kisama. Masaki corrected. Kisama-san. May I know more about my partner in the grass tournament? The tournament itself was of unique design. Actually, as a council member of Kusa, Masaki had designed part of its layout. Each contestant usually belonged to a group of up to 6 people. The confident ones might go alone, but that was usually a fatal mistake. Teaming up gave the chance of sharing the prizes even if some might not win. Also, there was tagging, so you could switch with another ninja mid-match. Using tactics to work in tandem with your teammate was a sure strategy for victory. The rounds themselves were tournament-based. Of course, there were massive preliminary matches to eliminate all of the cannon fodder. From each preliminary, only one group would emerge. 8 groups would end up in the actual tournament, where the fights would be tag-based. Answering Haku's question, Masaki smiled. He's strong enough to help you out. He's smart enough to know his limits, so he won't jeopardize you. But I'm going to warn you now. When he comes back, he might not be. Might not be? Well, human. The place he's training at has absolutely no humans there. That means that there's no such thing as social etiquette either. I can't tell you the details, but for him, he'll have lived that way for 4 years before he returns. Actually, he might not even have clothes on when he comes back. Hearing that, Haku almost spit out her food as she became startled. What? Well, would you wear clothes if you were around animals for 4 years? The two became silent as the imagery crushed the conversation. After a good moment's silence, Haku resumed her queries as she became more interested in the boy. So he's 14, from what you've told me. That would make him 2 years older than me. He's strong, right? The man remained silent however as he opened his eyes wide. Looking behind her, he smiled as he lifted a finger. I hope so. A voice, not belonging to anyone she had heard before, softly spoke behind her. His tone brimmed with quiet confidence and immediately Haku knew that he was the student. Hearing the sudden new voice, Haku turned around as she momentarily had to shield her eyes from the setting sun. A shadow suddenly blurred past her as it flew fist first into Masaki's face, effectively making the man fly a good 10 meters before knocking down a couple of trees. Now out of the sun, Haku's eyes focused on a fairly tall boy with long flowing blonde hair that was tied in the back into a ponytail that almost reached his waist. Slightly feminine in appearance, his midnight black garb contrasted his pale skin. Looking straight at Haku, the blonde dropped a knapsack as his eyes flickered between red and blue. Uzumaki Naruto. Not offering any other words, Naruto turned over to where Masaki had fallen as he walked over to him. Grabbing him by the collar, Naruto shook him as he slapped him twice. That's what you get for sending me without warning. The slaps were for lying to me. Masaki regained consciousness as he heard the boy's last words. Lying? Naruto softly smirked as he stepped back. There were 9 bosses, Bakumasaki-sensei. Indeed, the 3 summoned bosses had never been able to settle their game of rock, paper, scissors, so they had all decided to train the boy. It had been hell for him, but at least they never wasted time. So, when's the tournament? Masaki smiled as he slapped Naruto on the back, eliciting a glare from the boy, and pointed at Haku. That girl there will be your teammate. Why don't you get to know her? She'll explain the rules to you while Masaki stopped speaking as Naruto suddenly fell to the floor. Already asleep, Masaki shook his head as he noted the peaceful look on the blonde's face. Congratulations on making it back. We'll have a party after the tournament. Hey Haku. Haku's head shot up to Masaki as her eyes pried away from the teen. For some reason, she felt as if she had met him somewhere. Yes Kisama-sama? Take care of that boy tonight. Talk to him in the morning and get ready. The tournament is in 3 days and you need to rest up. I'll be in town for a bit to take care of some things. Oh, and by the way, call me by my real name. I guess those stupid animal bosses told him. It's Masaki. Turning around, Masaki furtively rubbed his cheek as disappeared from view. Yes, Masaki-sama. Turning back to the teen, she looked at his face. Looking around to see if anyone was there, she reached forward with a hand to touch his face before a hand suddenly grabbed hers in mid-air. Trying to pull away, Haku bit her lip as she tried to stay quiet. From the looks of it, the blonde was still asleep. To have such an unyielding defense even while asleep, what kind of training did this person go through? Deciding that prying her hand away was futile, she opted for a more comfortable position and also fell asleep next to the campfire. Hopefully, she would get some answers by the next day. The next morning, Haku awoke to find a strange feeling on her hand. It should have been incredibly cold, but for some reason, her entire body was filled with a comfortable warmth. Opening her eyes slowly, she leaned up as she found herself alone in the forest. Rubbing her eyes, she pulled some water from the nearby plants as she used it to wash her face. Usually Masaki-sama could be found sitting right across from her. But Haku's eyes suddenly snapped open as she became alert. That boy from yesterday, Uzumaki Naruto. Narrowing her eyes, she sat back down as she calmly breathed. For some reason, that comfortable feeling was still present. As if her entire body was bathed in warm water that flowed from her hand. Looking down at her hand, her heart skipped a beat as she saw a small gold flame wrapped around it. Forgetting all dignity as the ninja she had grown up as, she yelped with surprise as instinct took over and summoned a torrent of water to drench herself. Don't worry. That flame cannot harm things. It is only used for warmth. Dripping wet, Haku turned to her right as she saw the boy from yesterday sporting a small smirk of amusement. Actually, now that she thought about it, he seemed shorter than before. If you're wondering about my appearance, this is my proper age. The summon world has a different time flow from here. I just used my chakra to revert my physical appearance to what it should be. In my actual body, the difference in gravity would cause unnecessary things to happen. Naruto coughed lightly as he remembered what happened in the morning. When he had tried to jog over to the river, his legs had actually carried him over 6 miles past the stream before he was able to stop himself. Lessons and control were needed. The only reason he had been able to punch his sensei and stop had been due to the fact that Masaki's face had the constancy of pure steel. Haku stared at him in confoundment as she asked regarding his younger appearance. People can do that, correct? I know Masaki-sensei does. Also, there was that one woman Katsu you mentioned. But she never really perfected the technique. Haku stared at the boy, who was now a few inches shorter than her, before asking him innocently. "And what age are you?" Naruto's blonde hair, now much shorter, still swayed in the wind as he pushed it back. "I guess, 10. But you should know that. After all, we've met before, Hunter-nin-san." As if that name had triggered the memory, Haku suddenly backed away in fright as she pulled out several senbon needles. You're that SS criminal. Naruto of the Jogan? It's been a while since I heard that. I guess 4 years is a long time. You were the idiot student that Masaki-sama spoke of? Naruto's left eyebrow twitched ever so slightly as he frowned. Idiot? Sighing, Naruto shook his head as he let it go. Supposedly, his so-called sensei had undergone the same training at the age of 6. Despite resenting him, a part of Naruto couldn't help but be impressed. To survive in that world's gravity and face its horrors at the age of 6. That man was thoroughly a freak. Anyways, do you want to tell me about the tournament? Or should I just use this jargon to read your mind in a few seconds? Haku immediately spoke up as she remembered her last incident with the technique. I'll tell you. But only on the condition that you respect my privacy and never look through my head again. Naruto remained silent for a few seconds before finally nodding. Okay. But if you ever turn against me, that deal will be void. Haku, regardless of still being untrusting of the young boy, nodded as she raised her hand to seal for a handshake. Naruto looked at her hand for a few seconds before pointing at her hand. Anyo. What's that? Haku stared at him with disbelief as she looked at his finger. You've got to be kidding me. 2 days later, the long-awaited day of the grass tournament. Haku sighed as she walked alongside the young boy. He had simply settled for a black trench coat, saying that he could hide his weapons inside of there. Seemingly gliding with his coat barely touching the floor, the blonde wasted no movements as every part of him stood on guard. But the trade-off for such discipline, as Haku had found out the past few days, was that the boy had almost no social skills. No, he was able to talk and converse normally, albeit very quietly with very few words, but he was fine in that sense. What was wrong was that he had completely forgotten the customary rituals of society. Saying thank you before a meal, handshakes, salutes, and even bath etiquette. She lightly blushed as she remembered how she had forcefully taught him to never bathe with a person of the opposite sex. Striking into his mind that even looking at the other's naked body was criminal, she couldn't help but laugh a little as she recalled his puzzlement. Apparently, Animal World didn't differentiate in the matters of sex. The past 2 days had been helpful for the both of them. She had quickly discovered that Naruto was a boy of few words, but with profound and prodigious thoughts. They worked several strategies together as well as training with each other's weaknesses. Well, it was more like training her weaknesses. No matter how hard she tried, Naruto never moved from a single spot during training. Using weapons and other techniques, he always managed to beat her without taking one step. Also, she had often seen him training alone at night. He was always secretive about it, refusing to answer any questions about the gale storms of chakra she had felt while trying to sleep. Expecting no less from Naruto of the Jogan, she was confident of their spot on the main tournament, but yesterday night had been the real deciding factor in their conversation. She explained to him about the Sannin Orochimaru, and despite not sharing any information about the men, the boy seemed to grow a sudden excitement. It was as if he hadn't cared about the tournament before until she talked about the man. Not knowing his reasons, she decided that it was better to just leave their own reasons to themselves. We're here. Stopping at the stand, Haku watched the boy as he stepped forward to take a pin from the desk. The color of the pin meant that you were in the same group, and everyone had a different number on their pin. Looking at the back of the pin, she saw that they were to be in the preliminary stage 6. Everyone who is competing in the preliminary rounds, come to your respective stages. An announcer with a tuning vest yelled into the huge crowd as everyone shuffled to get to their stages. Each stage held 10 groups, with each group usually holding 6 people. That meant that there would be around 60 people on each stage at one time. It was basically a huge battle royale that eliminated anyone who wasn't strong enough. Haku, let me take care of this. We just have to eliminate all of the other groups, right? Haku nodded as she walked up the stairs to the stage. Are you sure? I could always just surround the place with my mirrors and take down everyone in a few minutes. Naruto's coat swished behind him as he placed his sunglasses over his eyes. They had decided to not let him use the Jogan for fear of being recognized. The sunglasses were an extra precautionary measure. However, Naruto had remained adamant about not dyeing his hair. After several futile attempts by her and Masaki, they decided to give up on the pursuit. The tuning announcer raised his voice as he pointed to the stages. Confirmation signals were given as the ninja smiled. All right. All competing contestants are present and accounted for. Everyone, welcome to the Kuza village. We are pleased to announce the 6th Kuza tournament. We have our esteemed judge, Mirobu-sama, who will rule over any and all battles. Naruto and Haku looked over to Mirobu as they saw Masaki sitting there with a bored expression. However, once he saw the two, he excitedly waved as he straightened up in his chair. That man had way too many aliases. This is your humble announcer Tekazu. The first battle of the preliminaries will begin in 10 seconds. Everyone on the stages stiffened up as groups gathered together to sort out their allies from their foes. Even Haku felt some anticipation as all of the ninja looked towards them. They probably thought that they would finish off the youngest competitors first. After all, their group was only comprised of 2 people both under the age of 15 to 10. 9. 8. 7. Stepping forward, Naruto glided over to the center of the stage as he reached into his coat. Haku quickly walked over to him as she quietly whispered into his ear. "Don't show off too much strength, Naruto. This is only the preliminary match." Naruto nodded as he opened up his jacket, revealing his primary weapon of a stick. The grins of the other ninja widened greatly as they stepped towards Naruto and Haku. In the crowd, 2 Kuzunin stood up as they pointed at Naruto. "That's the kid. Oh my god, he's going to get slaughtered." From the corner of his vision, Naruto saw the two as he vaguely remembered them as the 2 idiotic chunin who had led him into the village. 6. 5. 4. Naruto looked down at his stick as he frowned. Because that idiot sensei of his had broken his chokudo during their first encounter, he had been reduced to using sticks for swords and leaves for shuriken. He absolutely refused to use gen and hayami for chicken scrap opponents. Sensing his opponent's chakras, a smile reminiscent of pure evil leaked from his face as Haku shivered from fright. She had never seen him get serious once during their fights. 3. 2. 1. Naruto raised his stick as he summoned wind chakra, a fierce maelstrom suddenly overflowing his entire being in an instant. Go. In 1 second, the competitors on stage 6 had realized that they were hopelessly outmatched. In 1 second, the Grand Kusa tournament had begun. And in 1 second, the entire audience in the village of Kusagakure were left speechless as Naruto and Haku won their preliminary match and moved on to the main tournament. Chapter 10. Of Prisons and Beating Sticks. Near the borders of Kumagakure, an underground cavern hidden in the trenches of myriad stone pyramids lay in secret. In the course of its relatively short history as a prison, it had become one of the most horrifying places in existence. For within this horrifying and wretched void lay 2 individuals who were just as broken as the fragmented beams of light leaking through the small cracks under the stone barricade. Since the first day that they had been thrown into the room, they had come to understand that it would most likely serve as their final resting place. "Natsumi." A hoarse whisper diffused through the room as the other figure slowly opened her eyes with fatigue and pain. Don't strain your voice. Just focus on healing that wound." The boy leaned back further as he swallowed dry air. They could not even muster enough energy to move around the small room. The conditions were horrible and the water lacked the pristine characteristic that usually defined it as drinkable. The food was hardly comestible with mephitic odors that more often relinquished their insides rather than allow the food to stay within their stomachs. Such was the abject state of the former bounty hunters, Sasaki Azawari and Kojiro Natsumi. This was the price of trying to face that man. Madara had proved to be an opponent beyond them. It was not his overwhelming strength that had brought them into this predicament though. It had been the man's resources. As soon as they had broken in, Natsumi had immediately felt her strength sapping as a strange statue with multiple eyes absorbed her chakra. Powerless to help her partner, she could only watch in horror as Osawaru, Azawari's Jinchuriki counterpart, also disappeared to leave the weaker Azawari behind. With nothing to protect him, Azawari had quickly fallen to the might of one of Madara's men. While they were still weak, a strange seal was placed on them that made it impossible to use any chakra. Without their energy, they were tossed into the dungeon where they would periodically absorb some of Osawaru's Baijuo. It had been 2 years since their living hell had begun. "Natsumi." The weak voice once again reached her ears. "It's okay, don't waste your words on me." "I'm sorry." Natsumi stopped as she heard his defeated tone. She wanted to console him, but words couldn't reach her throat. They had already gone by for a few months without talking in order to save energy. Actually, now that she thought about it, why were they even trying to save energy? Was it an indication of hope? In their time there, she had learned that hope was a man-made invention meant to offer pleasantries for the cruel hand of fate. Azawari's voice shuddered as he choked on invisible tears. "I only wanted to find that man. It was because I was selfish that we..." "Don't worry about it. It was fun while we traveled. I have no complaints." "I know what happened to your arm, Natsumi. When you tried to steal the guard's keys that first week, you thought I hadn't noticed. But..." Azawari swore as he felt his despair rise despite lacking the emotional energy to fuel it. Trying to withdraw from him, her body refused to listen as his hand reached for her shoulder. The chakra seal's effects on demons were harsher than being burned alive. Yet despite her physical pain, her internal pain for her master was much greater. She had been so careful to eat as if nothing had happened to her. Indeed, in the time that Sasaki Azawari and Kojiro Natsumi had stayed in the Akatsuki hideout, they had paid harsh prices along with their freedom. She had lost an arm and Azawari had become blind. The two remained silent after that with the exception of Azawari's intermittent sniffle. After a few minutes, those sniffles died down to the usual silence as fatigue overtook the boy. As his eyes closed again, he breathed out one last sentence as he slumped against the wall. "I wonder what's going on outside? Remember that one Aniki, Naruto?" Natsumi smiled as she breathed slowly. "The one that's younger than us?" Settling against the cold stone wall, her body relaxed despite the pain that came from the seal as she remembered the specter-like boy. "Yeah, I wonder what that guy's doing right now." "Ooh oh. This is unprecedented. In the history of Kusagaku, no team has ever passed the preliminary round so quickly." As expected of the relatives of Mirobu-sama, the crowd, silent from astonishment, save the one ninja who had blinked during the countdown and was asking everyone what had happened, stared at Haku and Naruto as the blonde quietly stepped off stage. Naruto's flamboyant act had taken the attention of even some of the other competitors on the other stages. And then, like a domino effect, applause erupted from the stands as the crowd chanted Kusagari over and over again. On the steps of the square stage, Naruto sighed as he looked at the stick in his hand. He had still not managed to perfect his control. Tossing it back, the stick disintegrated into dust as Haku quietly followed after him. Until he was able to maintain the stick's form permanently, he would not be able to control his body in its 14-year-old state. However, Haku slightly frowned as she saw the remnants of the stick. She had seen him do the technique many times, although the stick had always disintegrated immediately after he used his chakra. To be able to keep its shape even after imbuing it with his godlike energy was proof that he had been training at night without her. Despite being comrades for only a few days, it was just a little bit disturbing that he would keep such secrets from her. But then again, Haku shook her head as she looked at the numerous ninjas sprawled upon the ground outside of the stage. Regardless of how he did it, he had helped her out with their quick victory. With this, she was one step closer to meeting Orochimaru and finding her master. And following stage 6, Kira-sama has defeated all of his opponents. The announcer's voice boomed out again as Haku turned to look at stage 8. The crowd cheered loudly, if not even louder than they did for Naruto's surprise victory, as a young man with long, spiky red hair around 18 years old stepped off of his respective stage. As far as she saw, he had no teammates. Remembering the name Kira, she understood this person to be the former tournament champ as well as the famed student of Masaki-sama. Looking over to Mirobu, her curiosity slightly grew as she saw his frowning face. Something didn't add up. Why did Masaki-sama help give Naruto the power to defeat his own student? What was his motive? In the world of ninjas, there was no such thing as a free bento. "Haku. You're slow." Haku snapped out of her pondering as she saw Naruto waiting for her. Wait. Her mind froze as she tried to analyze the situation. He was waiting for her? The boy who had completely lacked all social propriety just a few days ago? Smiling just a little bit, Haku resisted the urge to put a little spring into her step. She followed his pace. The two then disappeared into the tent that was for the winners of the preliminary matches. They had no need to watch the others. In time, she knew that they would fight Orochimaru. The rest of the tournament passed by quickly with the succeeding groups easily showing their superiority. All in all, 8 groups were left. Since it was an elimination tournament, Haku and Naruto would have to fight 3 different groups in total. One of those would definitely be Orochimaru's group since she doubted that anyone here, save maybe Kira, would be on his level. And so, the first 3 matches passed on relatively quickly with the victors winning without any of their real strength. It seemed that there was still a large power margin within the first seed. Within the victors, no spectacularly distinguishing techniques were shown. It was obvious that everyone wanted to save his or her best cards for last. And then, the time had come for them to step onto the stage. Their opponent was Group 6 with 3 different members. All of them had quite normal appearances, but she knew best that figures could be deceiving. "Haku, do you want to go first?" Haku looked at the line of opponents before shaking her head. "If it's okay, I'd rather stay behind and analyze the opponents. If you want to, tag out." Naruto nodded curtly before stepping onto the stage. That was what he had wanted in the first place. Looking at the other end where the group of 6 was, he brought out his stick as his gaze pierced through them. "Who's first?" One of the members slowly stepped forward as he walked up to meet Naruto. He had a nimble build with long silver hair. With a pale complexion rivaling his own, Naruto immediately recognized the ninja as someone who had gone through some severe trauma. Also, as far as he could tell, This man was not under disguise. However, there was a slight patch of skin covering the middle of the man's forehead. Although a person would normally not be able to tell, Naruto's frequent use of the Sharingan had led him to be able to notice the little nuances of the human figure. Artificial skin grafts and disguises were no exception. From the build of the man, Naruto could also tell that he was a short-range fighter. However, there was still something off with his frame. Bowing slightly, the man's face remained emotionless as he withdrew a single Kodachi. "I, Gotetsu, will serve as your opponent." Naruto nodded as his face became just as blank. The first rule he had learned from the summon masters was to wipe out your emotions during a fight. It made your movements virtually unreadable and also played a psychological role in a fight. In an instant, a maelstrom of chakra and wind surrounded Naruto's already infamous beating stick as he disappeared and reappeared behind Kotetsu. The Kodachi user, in a feat of amazing reflexes, twisted his body around to parry the attack with his Kodachi. Despite the harshness of Naruto's attack, the man had used the Kodachi expertly to absorb the blow and even dispel some of the wind back towards the audience. However, as his stick tested its durability against Kotetsu's Kodachi, Naruto's eyes immediately caught sight of the man's arms rumbling with some strange movement. Sensing danger, Naruto immediately dropped his stick as he jumped above the man. Though it was for but a second, a bone seemed to shoot out from the man's ulna before retreating back into the man's arm. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto flipped over as he used a burst of wind to dash midair back to his original spot on the stage. His time on the island had not only trained his strength, but had also introduced a new hobby, breaking his opponent's techniques. Although it would be a lot easier to just use his Sharingan, he actually enjoyed the process of analyzing and dissecting his opponent's fighting styles. It was this keen ability that had led him to his victory over some of the more tenacious summon bosses. The Kodachi wielder slowly stood up back to an upright position as his Kodachi lay limp in his hand. To think that his opponent was actually able to avoid his bone technique. That kind of ability came from experience and honed instinct, not just luck. Since his bloodline technique would give away his identity, he needed to use his bones underneath his robes. Unfortunately, such a fighting style was cumbersome to him. Nevertheless, he would need to finish this without exhibiting his bloodline. In the end, all was for his master. Shifting into a fighting stance, Kotetsu held his Kodachi in front of him as he felt his bones rumble from underneath his robes. Despite whatever his mind reasoned out, his bones thirsted for battle. He would need to finish this quickly. Looking at the Kodachi wielder's stance, Naruto realized that his back leg held the majority of the man's weight. That meant that he was going to be on the defensive. Deciding to test the waters, Naruto sprung forward as he pulled out several leaves. Ninpa, Ha-Shuriken no Jutsu, Ninja Art, Leaf Shuriken Technique. The chakra-imbued leaves spun extremely fast as little vortexes of wind shot out around them. Raising his sword, Kotetsu jumped back as he parried 2 or 3 leaves at a time with his sword. During the onslaught of the makeshift Shuriken attack however, Naruto had already shot behind him with another stick. Although this one lacked the maelstrom that had been present with the first stick, Kotetsu could sense that it was nowhere near the fragility of a normal branch. However, the result would be the same. Bringing his arm around, he continued to parry the leaves with his Kodachi as a bone quickly slipped out of his robe. Grabbing onto it in reverse hold, he slashed back towards the boy as he used one of his signature techniques, Tsubaki no Mai, Dance of the Camellia. In a flurry of attacks, the bone wielder launched his vicious technique in full power. After the last leaf was deflected, his Kodachi joined in as he used both swords to execute the technique. As Kimimaro, leader of the Sound Five, he had never failed to finish an opponent with this attack. It was the very essence of the fusion of taijutsu and kenjutsu. Yet, Kotetsu, or Kimimaro, frowned as he found that he couldn't budge his swords from place. Both tips of his swords had penetrated the stick and, to his displeasure, he found that they were stuck in that position. Haku looked at the two from the bottom of the stage as she remembered the technique. He had used it on her needles. Basically, the theory behind the technique was quite simple. If Naruto relinquished the chakra in the sticks for a split second and allowed that Kodachi wielder to penetrate the wood, then Naruto could just as easily keep them inside by subsequently increasing the density of the stick with chakra. Also, by placing his chakra within the stick, he could make the sword stick. While it sounded simple in theory, it was nearly impossible to do in practice due to the precise timing and speed that you needed. Grabbing both ends of the stick with his hands, Naruto then spun the 2 ends around, causing Kimimaro to let go of his weapons. So it was a bone. Naruto commented offhandedly as he looked at the weapon in his stick. Well, no matter. Throwing away the Kodachi and the bone, Naruto held up his stick as he charged chakra back into it. Kimimaro felt his heart race as he tried to calm himself. While his exterior remained placid, His mind was racing to try and defy the very logic of what had just occurred. Although he briefly understood what had just happened, he could not believe it. No human could have such reflexes and astute chakra control. Not even his master, Orochimaru. Moreover, the boy had shown considerable skill in swordplay. Even with one stick, there were numerous times that he could have been countered. His only hope now was that the 2 points of damage on the boy's weapon would be enough to help him break it with his next round of attacks. "This match is going to end soon if you don't use your full power," Naruto said while slowly walking towards Kimimaro. Kimimaro stood up as he released another bone. "What do you mean? I am not like the trash of some of my other teammates. You will find that it is much harder to defeat me than you think." Although he sounded confident on the outside, Kimimaro was starting to panic in the inside. He was supposed to have rivaled Orochimaru when he was his age, yet this boy who was at least a couple years younger than him was making it seem like he was Tuyo or a random sound Chunin. "Well then, I guess I'll start attacking seriously now." Naruto's eyes lightened up ever so slightly as he opened his cloak and reached towards one of the inner pockets to pull out another stick. Except this one had jagged regions with multiple nails attached to it that made it more of a thorny club than a sleek stick. A collective "what the hell?" seemed to echo through the audience as even Haku began to wonder what hobbies Naruto had developed in Summon World. Kimimaro almost groaned aloud as even the sound for back on the ground stage winced. This was going to be a little bit more difficult than they had originally thought. "Ooh-oh!" Azawari's eyes snapped open as he gripped his head with his hands. Flailing around, he tried to kick off of something, anything, in hopes of escaping the excruciating pain. "Stop it! You'll kill him." Natsumi, despite having no strength, stood up as she made a feeble attempt at a run. Instead, she felt her legs give out from under her as her hands clutched her. "Damn it!" Screaming in frustration, she watched in hopelessness as Azawari's screams finally muted to unpeaceful unconsciousness, the streams of yokai energy ripping out from his body. "This process is taking too long. Are you sure this is working, Pain?" 9 shadows stood around in a circle as each one rested on top of what seemed to be fingers. "It's because of that traitor, Orochimaru. Despite his apparent worthlessness, his chakra would have made this ritual much faster. I had originally created this mechanism for drawing on the chakra of 12 kage level ninja. I should be enough for 50 kages. Quiet, Datara. It's bad enough you go bragging around about your art. At least my art doesn't look like something out of a horror movie." Sasori's eyes gained a dangerous gleam as he moved his tail dangerously close to Datara head. "Hey! Hey! We're working here. That's not fair." "Enough!" Pain shouted, making both Datara and Sasori freeze. Here were two of the most feared ninja of all time, and yet they bickered like children. Sometimes Pain wondered why he had ever bothered following that man's suggestion. True, the Baijuo would help his ambition, but, seeing the suspended boy nearly dead, Pain lowered his hand as the jutsu fell. "That is enough for today. We will continue the extraction process in 1 week's time after the carrier has regained some life." The members collectively grumbled as Pain's shadow disappeared. One by one, all of the ninja faded until just one shadow was left. By then, Natsumi had already reached the unconscious Azawari as she checked up on him. "He's alive. We wouldn't kill him before extracting the Baijuo." Natsumi turned as she glared at the man who had remained behind. It was the man who had captured them and was currently in charge of keeping them in this prison. "He better stay alive." Itachi sighed as he bent down, his hand reaching over the boy's torso. A green light started to shine as Natsumi immediately brought up her hand to push it away. Unfortunately, her strength was just enough to fall on the man's steady hand. "Stop hurting him, stop." Itachi remained silent as silent beads of sweat ran down his brow. Medical techniques had never been his forte and this girl's whining wasn't helping him in the slightest. "I'm trying to heal him." Natsumi stopped whimpering as she looked at Azawari's face. Sure enough, the boy's face had become less strained. Waiting in anticipation for a few minutes, she finally turned to the man before asking, "Why?" Itachi closed his hands as the glow faded, his eyes closing in tandem. "Because he is needed alive." With that, Itachi knocked Natsumi out with a quick blow to her neck and lifted them up together. Straining slightly under their combined weight, Itachi sighed as he walked over to the holding cells. Looking at the unconscious faces of the two, his face lightened as he gently laid them down on the dungeon floor. Making sure that no one was watching, he sharpened his eyes as he lit a small amaterasu in the air above them. Until they woke up, the flame would keep them warm. Closing the door, Itachi sighed as he leaned his head against the wall. "Good night." Straightening up after a few moments, he then walked away as a stream of blood flowed from his right eye. It was almost time to visit a certain someone. "Ooh-oh." Naruto kicked Kimimaro several times before lashing out with his beating stick there. 2. Widening his eyes with fear, Kimimara's primal instinct screamed for him to dodge the chakra whips as his legs exhibited a strength they had never knew before. Jumping away, Kimimaro resisted the urge to jump into his Curse Seal Level 2 stage as little chakra whips continuously grooved his skin. However, if he showed either the Curse Seal or his unique bloodline in front of the audience, it would jeopardize their entire mission. In fact, it was a risk even using the Kodachi-like bones. In the midst of his attacks, Naruto's face remained impassive as he asked Kimimaro, "Why aren't you fighting at full strength? Surely you must have a reason. Perhaps you're—" Naruto turned his head around as he looked at Kimimaro's remaining teammates. Seeing his chance, Kimimaro leapt forward with a downward strike. It was all for naught though, as Naruto blocked the bone with 2 fingers from his free hand. Turning his head back to Kimimaro, Naruto flashed a hint of a mischievous smile as he finished his sentence, "Your master ordered you not to because of your foreign bloodline." Kimimaro's eyes widened as he realized that somehow, the boy had figured out that Orochimaru-sama was one of his teammates. This factor changed everything. He needed to defeat this person at all costs? Naruto smirked as he finished Kimimaro's thoughts aloud. "What? How did you?" He was stopped short from finishing his question though as Naruto slowly dipped his head, raising his Sharingan eyes up at Kimimaro. His voice became menacingly deeper as 6 tomoe spun around his pupils at a furious speed. "Call Orochimaru out. I should greet the man who made me like this." Kimimaro's hand fell as beads of sweat fell from his head. How? How did this happen? He had heard all about the freak experiment that Orochimaru had created in Konoha. To think that this boy would be standing in front of them. Gulping, Kimimaro raised his hand as he yelled out to the Kuza judges, "I forfeit the match." Walking away from the smiling Naruto and towards one, frowning Kuza disguised Nin, Kimimaro whispered a few words into his master's ears before a sickening and horrifying smile made its way onto his face. "Trap those 2 in the stage with the rest of the Sound 5. The plan for the Sword Kusanagi is of little importance now. Kabuto will help me take care of the Ice Nin while I go greet my new container." Kimimaro winced slightly as he heard his master speak of a new container before bowing. "Yes, Orochimaru-sama." Meanwhile, on the stage, Naruto stared at the man Kimimaro had approached with his Sharingan blaring behind his sunglasses. The chakra level and the strange jutsu placed on his body made him the greatest suspect for the missing nin who had cursed him with these eyes. Motioning Haku onto the stage, he threw off his cloak as it made a dent in the stage. "Get ready for your revenge, Haku. You can have whatever is left of him after I tear him to pieces." A slight chill ran up her spine as she saw his eyes glow red even from behind his sunglasses. Never had he shown any emotion other than amusement or boredom while he had been with her. However, Haku couldn't help but feel some excitement as she pulled out a scroll with the kanji for sword on it. She hadn't been waiting for this day like a lame duck. She would get her master back, with either Naruto's power or her own. That's the end guys. If you enjoyed then make sure to leave a comment. This is Chaos Shinobi signing off.